You're listening to the Armchair GM Sports Network.
You're listening to the Niagara Hockey Lowdown Sabres Edition, your source for all news, press conference reactions, analysis, and objective discussions regarding the NHL's Buffalo Sabres from right here in the Niagara region. Here are your hosts, Brandon Caputo and Austin Broad.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another installment of the Niagara Hockey Lowdown Sabres Edition right here on the Armchair GM Sports Network, your May 21st, 2021 edition, your source North American sports coverage by sports fans, for sports fans, delivered to you right here in the beautiful Niagara region. You can find us on social media for updates, giveaways, and sponsorship promo codes by following the podcast on Twitter at Armchair GM Pod, as well as this show's podcast make sure you're following it at AGM Sabres Pod. We post a poll every week before our episodes, so make sure you're following us there as well. You can like us on Facebook and Instagram, and we are on many different platforms, including Spreaker.com, the free Spreaker app, as well as Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, CastBox, and Deezer, and now in video form on YouTube.com as well. So make sure you're subscribing to our YouTube channel, as my friendly little subscribe pillow says there. As always, I'm one of your hosts of the Niagara Hockey Lowdown Sabres Edition. My name is Brandon Caputo. You can see my Twitter handle below there, at Caputs13_AGM. And I'm always very pleased to be joined on the Sabres portion of the network by my good friend and co-host. He is at Austin_Broad. He is Austin Broad, and he does a lot of good things. Austin, why don't you go ahead and plug what you're doing right now? A lot of interesting stuff you got going on.
Yeah, so basically I'm a video scout for FC Hockey, Future Considerations. I do Canes prospects for DauberProspects.com. I do a lot of draft stuff for TCB, thechargingbuffalo.net. And coming in the next couple weeks, there's going to be an exclusive prospects podcast coming out on TCB featuring myself and my buddy Curtis. So follow that on Twitter at 716FuturePod and look for some great prospects and draft stuff coming from us in the future there.
Awesome. So a lot of good stuff coming from Austin over there. So go and check that out as well. Our beautiful user-friendly website, ArmchairGMSports.com, for all things regarding the network, including articles, podcast episodes, sponsors, and contributors. And as well, we have a brand new mobile version that's way better when you're looking at it on your phone than looking on a desktop version. So with that said, speaking of articles, Austin, we put up a big article last week, kind of just recapping the Sabres 2021 season and you kind of going into the off season. So we're going to kind of touch on that a little bit today. We got a lot lined up for today's show. The thumbnail of the video is Should They Stay, Should They Go? And that we're going to be talking about Jack Eichel, Sam Reinhart, Rasmus Ristolainen, some of the mainstays in the Sabres organization that are they're rumored to be on the move if there are big changes coming to the organization in this coming offseason. So we'll talk about that, and we'll talk about a few other housekeeping notes to talk about in the beginning of the show. But before we get into that, Austin, just briefly recap what we talked about in the article last week from ArmchairGMSports.com about the Sabres' upcoming offseason and the takeaways as well. Just your thoughts on, like, pre-offseason thoughts, I guess you could say.
So I already went into this offseason thinking it was arguably the most important offseason probably since the Eichel draft lottery, I would say. I mean, McDavid or Eichel was kind of the thing there. Obviously now Eichel's been here for 6 years. It seems the relationship is pretty fractured, if not almost unrepairable at this point. You got Reinhart saying he's got some stuff to think about. I mean, you got a potential big head coaching hire coming up depending on what route they go. What are they going to do with the team? Basically, it was already huge, and all of a sudden this Eichel and Reinhart bomb drop at their exit interviews. It became even more important because if Jason Carmanos and Kevin Adams do decide to move on from at least, mainly Jack Eichel. Sam Reinhart's an important player, but it's mostly about the Jack Eichel situation. If you decide to move on from him, that trade is a franchise-altering trade. If you if you hit the trade out of the park, you're never going to win the trade because you're never going to get a player that's as good as Jack Eichel in that trade. But if you hit that trade out of the park and you get a couple really core pieces to build around going forward, that's a big deal. If you end up going the Ryan O'Reilly trade route, you could possibly set the team back even farther than the team's already been set back. So a lot to handle, not to mention you have Kevin Adams, who's an inexperienced GM in charge of all this. So it's a big offseason coming up for these guys.
Oh, absolutely. So with that said, we're going to do a few housekeeping things to talk about here. A couple of key notes here. And this first segment today is going to be brought to you by J&L Flooring, a Niagara-based specialty flooring and design company. Simplified processes and making homes beautiful are their specialties. Visit them at jnlflooring.com to start on the floor of your dreams today. Jack's a big Sabres fan, so I know he wants to be the first sponsor of the Sabres Edition episode. So with that said, Austin, let's quickly, and on the screen here for you people watching on YouTube, and I'll just kind of highlight it for those listening on audio. We have Jack Eichel's King Clancy Award. Speaking of Jack Eichel here, he's been selected as the team's nominee for the King Clancy Award. Each of the 31 teams have one nominee. The winner will be chosen by a committee of NHL executives. The winning player will be announced during the Stanley Cup Finals and will receive $25,000 donation to a charity of their choice, and the two runner-ups will receive $5,000. Jack Eichel continued to support Roswell Park Comprehensive Cancer Institute and Best Buddies of WNY, two organizations that he aligned closely with during his time in Buffalo. Since coming to Buffalo in 2015, he sent 450 bouquets of flowers to nurses at Roswell Park. In the recognition of International Nurses Day, Eichel was also active in the start of COVID-19, donating $5,000 personal protective equipment masks to local hospitals in last April. So we talk about Jack Eichel a lot leaving the city, Austin, and if he's going to be leaving as the captain or not. But I think it's safe to say that Jack Eichel, inside and out of the organization, has had a lasting impact on the city of Buffalo and its community as well.
Yeah, I mean, Eichel's always done a lot of work in the community there. I mean, he's the face of the franchise, so having him being an active member of the community, pairing with Roswell, doing a lot of these great things is obviously, it's huge. The impact he's had on Buffalo, it can't be understated that, the work that he's done there. And, much like if he does decide to ask for a trade, or if the team does decide to move on from him, I'm sure he'll have an impact off the ice in whatever community he goes to, because that's just the type of person that he is, and that's the type of work that these professional athletes do. They use their platform to help do good for their communities, and it's good to see Jack getting nominated.
I know people were kind of laughing at that, considering that the captain's might be on the way out and he's getting nominated for the leadership award. But you know what? That doesn't really bother me at all, because it doesn't mean that Jack Eichel's still not a good person within the community, and he is the captain of this team, like you mentioned, and ingraining himself within the community is something that he took pride in from day one that he got here.
Yeah, and you know what I mean? Like, this isn't a slight at Jack at all, but whoever takes over for captain, or if Jack does leave, someone within that team is going to step up and continue to do the work that he does, because that's just what pro athletes do. So I don't people wanted to make a little joke about that, but that's just part of being a pro athlete. You do good work in the community that you live in. It's just the nature of the beast.
Yep, absolutely. So that's the Sabres nominee for the King Clancy Award. We'll see how far Jack gets in that process. Next on the list here is the Sabres at the World Championships here, Austin. They've got 6 players actually in total here. It will be in Latvia starting on May 20th, or I guess it has begun already. Yep. So it will run through June 6th. It was canceled last year due to COVID-19. Finland won the most recent one in 2019. So the participating Sabres this year are Colin Miller for Team Canada, Arttu Ristolainen for Finland, JJ Peterka and Tobias Rieder for Team Germany, Victor Olofsson for Sweden, and Tage Thompson for the United States. Austin, any players that you're really looking forward to watching here in the Worlds as far as the Sabres content here?
Well, I mean, given the contract status of Rieder and Miller, I'm more looking towards Peterka, because he's a prospect, so it'll be nice to see how he does there. Once Germany does register him, he didn't get to play in their game this morning. Reeder had a goal, by the way, so that was good for that. I'm looking forward to seeing Tage Thompson, Arttu Ruotsalainen, and Victor Olofsson. I mean, those are the young guys that probably have a chance to be here next year, so it's going to be good to see those guys. And if I'm not mistaken, he's not a Sabre, but he's Sabres property. I'm pretty sure Lawrence Pilot is also playing for Sweden, so that'll be fun for some Sabres fans.
Yeah, Lawrence Pilot went back to the KHL last year. That was an interesting nugget there. But yeah, JJ Peterka, I know somebody that you've been high on ever since last year's World Juniors. Just what are you looking for out of him, kind of taking that next step here and playing against men in a big tournament here?
Well, I mean, he played in the DEL this year and had 20 points in 30 games or so. Like, he plays against men his whole, like, that's what he does. That's pretty much the nature of the beast, being a young hockey player in Europe. You're playing against men. So I'm excited to see him against, men are from around the world, from different leagues. The DEL is a good league, but now he's going to get to play against guys from the NHL. He's going to get to play against guys from Liga and from the SHL. So it'll be interesting just to see how he stacks up there. And, I mean, he's, aside from Jack Quinn, depending on people's opinions, JJ Peterka might be the highest rated prospect in the Sabres system. So it's going to be fun to see how he is at this tournament.
No, I agree. And I was looking at the rosters, and especially for Canada and the United States, the rosters are kind of underwhelming considering what you'd really expect from a high-end tournament or even in past World Championships where we've seen a lot of top-end players go. Obviously, we're not seeing that this year. Maybe that has to do with the pandemic and things like that. But it seems like there's more of an opportunity for some of these guys that maybe wouldn't have a chance to play in these tournaments and that you wouldn't expect to be on these top-end teams like Canada and the United States. So I'm really looking at what Tage Thompson's going to be able to do, Austin. I really think that, the end of the season that he had with Don Granato as the head coach, we really saw his game taken to a next level. And I think on a USA team that he could see top 6 minutes for sure on this roster the way that it's looking out. So I think Tage Thompson, I'm looking for him to kind of take that momentum that he had at the end of the season with Buffalo and see what he can do for Team USA. I really think that, he has the confidence now to hopefully be a top 9 forward in the NHL and kind of use that big body to his advantage. So I'm really looking at Tage Thompson as the guy that I'm going to be keeping a close eye on as far as Sabres property that is going to the World Championships this year.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, this is a big tournament for Tage. I mean, he got the confidence back under Don Granato. He's got a chance on a younger roster to be an impactful player. USA is going to be a fun team. I mean, same with Canada. Canada went with a little bit younger there. Honestly, I was kind of hoping Cousins would be invited, but I don't know what happened there. But Canada and USA, you're going to see Owen Power and Matt Beniers as well, draft-eligible prospects. So this tournament is going to be younger than we've normally seen, so it's going to be more exciting. I mean, I hope Tage has a great tournament because it would be big for him. I mean, he obviously under Ralph Kruger did not really have a spot in the lineup on a regular basis. He was overthinking every time he touched the puck. Under Granato, you could see him calm down a little bit and kind of put his game together. And I'm hoping that this tournament is just another developmental piece for the kid because we did give him a 3-year contract. He is on Buffalo for the next 2 years, depending on what happens with the expansion draft. So he is going to be like you said, top 9 piece. But next year, depending on the way the team goes, he could be a top 6 piece for this team next year. So, yeah, he is definitely number 2 on my list of must-watch for Sabres players.
The lasting piece of the Ryan O'Reilly trade that we have to cling on to as far as something positive to come out of that. So we're hoping that Tage Thompson can still be a productive Sabre moving forward. Speaking of longtime productive Sabres, and I'm going to pull it up on the screen here, Derek Roy announced his retirement from pro hockey the other day. He was on with the Instigators with Craig Rivet and Andrew Peters, kind of discussing that as well. But Derek Roy Austin obviously spent most of his solid NHL career in Buffalo, also spent time with Vancouver, St. Louis, Nashville, and had a cup of coffee in Edmonton before going overseas. And he really discussed how much that kind of made him learn more about the world, just going over and playing overseas and in a bunch of different leagues over there since 2015-16. Got to play at the Olympics as well, I do believe. So just Derek Roy obviously was here as a Sabre during, I guess you could say the glory years of the 2000s, those 05, 06, 06, 07 teams. And he was basically the number 1 center moving forward after Briere and Drury left. So, up until he was traded for Steve Ott in 2011, 2012, he was a mainstay at the Sabres center ice position, and dare I say he was the number one center in the last time that the Sabres were in the playoffs against Philadelphia. He was kind of the number one center who had been gone with injury. He had come back for late into that playoff. So just Derek Roy, what are you thinking of the number 9 career for the former Kitchener Ranger and Memorial Cup champion?
I mean, like you said, once those guys left, he was kind of the guy. He might be one of the more undervalued Sabres of that era because, I mean, in every full season, 2003-04, he only played 49 games and had 19 points. But in every season that he played, at least 70 games with the Sabres, he had no less than 40 points. I mean, in 2010-11, he had 35 points in 35 games. He was averaging a point per game. Like he was very good for the Sabres, and he was actually pretty good for. He kind of resurged in that last NHL year in Edmonton. He had 22 points in 46 games after a little bit of a down dip for him. But Derek Roy was awesome. I mean, I think he had a bit of bad rep from some people, but at the end of the day, he produced, and he was a lot of fun to watch. And he had impacts that weren't on the score sheet as well. And a little fun fact about Derek Roy, he played in Germany for Munich with a Fort Erie boy, my old neighbor, Trevor Park. So it was really cool getting to see a guy that I know and grew up with getting to play with one of the guys that I grew up and idolized.
Yeah, that's hilarious. I actually had a Derek Roy jersey when I was younger tyke. But no, Derek Roy, I think he got a bad rap from the media because his post-game scrums were basically just the same every single time. He wouldn't give a lot of information. He was the king of the hockey cliches after losses and not dealing with the media maybe as good as they had liked. So maybe he was given a bad rap in that regard just because of the answers he would give to the media post games. But I do think Derek Roy, and like you mentioned, his stats. I mean, he had an incredible career for the Sabres, and I think one that was kind of undervalued at that time, especially, when Drury and Briere left. There was a big hole there, and he kind of stepped into that. Him and Tim Connolly were kind of the number 1 and 2 centers, and we saw when he was out of the lineup in that 10-11 season, the last time that they went to the playoffs. I mean, he stepped in big time and produced at that number 1 center, and when he was out of the lineup, you could clearly see that they were missing his production there. So him and Thomas Vanek had a very nice chemistry. So I think Derek Roy is one of those guys that we'll remember from that, I guess, golden age of Sabres hockey in the mid-2000s. That was one of those guys that was, a very important piece that they definitely needed in the lineup.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, he was a crucial member of that team. He was, the media thing, yeah, he had a bad rep in the media, but let's face it, Buffalo media has a pretty good reputation for getting on certain players because of their behavior in the media. Sam Reinhart. Sorry, I just had a little cough there. But, yeah, like you said, I think his bad rep was a little bit overblown. He was an excellent player for Buffalo. He was everything you could have asked for in a guy that behind, Briere and Drury, he was in Vanek. Like, he played with all these guys, and the guy just flat out produced. He finishes his NHL career with 524 points. Like, that's awesome. 500 plus points in the NHL. That's a huge successful career. Good for him. Glad he's going to be able to lace it up and retire on his own terms. And, hopefully whatever he does next, he enjoys it. And maybe someday down the line, like every other Sabre that's retiring, like Ryan Miller, he probably wants to be in the front office. So who knows? Good for Derek Roy. I'm glad that he's able to lace it up. And, aside from Briere and Drury, Roy was probably one of my favorite Sabres in that era.
Yeah, for sure. 738 career NHL games, and then also 27 playoff points in 49 games too. So he was a valuable member of the playoff teams that we so have longed for this last decade from Sabres hockey. What we would give to even have Derek Roy and Tim Connolly taking us to the playoffs as our number 1 and 2 centers. Who would have thought that would be the lasting memory that we would have of the playoffs? But Derek Roy, great career, and Ryan Miller, we discussed in a previous episode too, Austin, another great Sabre from that era, kind of lacing him up as well. So a couple of key contributors from the 05, 06, and 06, 07 teams, Derek Roy and Ryan Miller, both hanging it up at the same time here.
Yeah, it's sad. That era is pretty much coming to an end, and that's the last good era of Sabres hockey that we have to cling on to.
Chris Drury, now the general manager of the New York Rangers, and we can talk about that another day. But with that said, ladies and gentlemen, that's basically it for our first segment on today's show. We're going to take a quick commercial break. We're going to come back, and we're going to get right into what the thumbnail is talking about here. Should they stay? Should they go? We have the Twitter poll to discuss it as well. Talking Sam Reinhart, Jack Eichel, and Rasmus Ristolainen trades. So stay right here. I'll be right back on the Niagara Hockey Lowdown Sabres edition and right here on the Armchair GM Sports Network.
Experience a new way to play daily fantasy sports and esports on Thrive Fantasy. Thrive's game concept revolves around player props, which are simple over-unders on player stats. There are contests for traditional sports including the NFL, NBA, MLB, PGA, and cricket, as well as esports titles including CSGO, Dota 2, League of Legends, and more coming soon. Here's how to play. Choose your lineup of over-unders for top-tier athletes that have the biggest impact on the game. Each prop has a fantasy point total based on how likely it is to hit. The more points the selection is worth, the riskier it is. Rack up the most points and win a share of the prize pool. Thrive is awarded over $2 million in cash, so come and prop up today.
You're listening to the Armchair GM Sports Network, the Niagara region's best local source for North American sports podcasting coverage. By sports fans, for sports fans.
Got to unmute the mic first. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to segment 2 of our Niagara Hockey Lowdown Sabres edition. Thank you to Guitar Logic, as always, for the great Sabre Dance guitar riff on our show here. Austin Broad and Brandon Caputo back with you here. And our second segment today is brought to you by Carmine's Pizzeria Italiano, home of the best pizza and wing combos in Niagara Falls, Ontario. 4 years running from Niagara this week. Visit them at carmine'spizzeria.ca and like their Facebook page for unique promotions. Available for call, pickup, or delivery. Carmine's Pizzeria Italiano, way too good. So, Austin, let's quickly, before we discuss the Jack Eichel, Sam Reinhart, and Rasmus Ristolainen trade discussions here, let's quickly look at the Sabres cap situation. And for you watching on YouTube, I have it up on the screen here on Cap Friendly, as always. And for you guys following along with audio, you can just pull it up yourself and take a look. But Austin, going big offseason here. Obviously, Jack Eichel's under contract for a long time here for the Sabres, but he's kind of not on this list because I couldn't fit it all in because he's currently under the long-term IR spot. But he is there making $10 million for a long time. So Jeff Skinner obviously is on the team regardless if they want him or not, $9 million. And like I mentioned in the article last week, that Jeff Skinner can still play hockey, and we saw that under Don Granato. So we saw a resurgence from Jeff Skinner the second half of the season, so hopefully he can continue that into next year. But other than that, Austin, I mean, we look at Rasmus Ristolainen, he's got 1 year left at $5.4 million, and then you look at Sam Reinhart, who needs a contract as well, so he's a currently restricted free agent. So what are we looking at here as far as the Sabres cap situation goes, and just how Kevin Adams is going to be able to kind of tackle this offseason? A lot of RFAs, a lot of UFAs, a lot of guys probably won't be back from this list here, but there will be a couple key guys that he's going to want to bring back, obviously, even on the defense core as well.
Yeah, so looking at it right now, they have a projected $32.6 million in cap space, but on defense alone, you've got Will Borgen, Henry Jokiharju, and Rasmus Dahlin all as pending restricted free agents. They're all going to need contracts. Borgen probably looking at a bridge deal. Jokiharju, I'm not really sure what to expect. He was really good under Don Granato. Dahlin, I mean, don't make the same mistake and bridge this guy. If you're going to bridge him for 1 year and then give him that long-term deal. But I hope Kevin really tries to get him locked up long-term, because if we are trading Jack Eichel, like we're going to get into a minute, we're going to need a face of the franchise, and Dahlin and Cousins are pretty much going to be those two guys. Forward, you got Asplund and Middlestat. and Reinhart as pending restricted free agent. So Reinhart, again, we'll get into that situation. I have some thoughts there, but Middlestad and Aspen are going to be two interesting ones. I don't think they're going to take up a whole lot of cap space, but maybe you can get them on bargain deals, kind of like what you did with Tage. You give them a little bit more term and a little bit more money, so that they'll be inclined to lock up here for a little bit more than a year or two here. Because if we are trading these players that we're going to get into, we still need players on this roster to ice a team. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, it's tough because there's some contracts that I'm sure they'd like to get out from under here as the Seattle expansion draft is looming here. I mean, you'd love to be able to get rid of Kyle Okposo's contracts, $6 million for 2 more years, but we can get into the expansion stuff later on in another episode. But you'd obviously think that there's something going on there with their decision making. With if they re-sign a couple more of these guys, that's more contracts that are going to be exposed to Seattle in the expansion draft. So could you see them? I know that they gave up a draft pick to Vegas to hold on to Linus Ullmark. Do you think that the Sabres are going to go that route this year to kind of protect somebody that Seattle might take and to give up a draft pick? Or do you think that they're just going to say, have at it, and we'll kind of go from there and whoever you take?
I mean, in a perfect world, you maybe entice them to take on a Kyle Okposo or a Colin Miller, because you don't want to lose William Borgen. You don't want to lose Henry Jokiharju. And if you're protecting Rasmus Ristolainen, that means one of those two guys is going to be exposed. On forward, it really comes down to, are you protecting Tage Thompson or Rasmus Asplund? And I think solely based off the contract that the Sabres gave Tage Thompson, they'll lean towards protecting him. But if you are doing your due diligence and you protect the right guys and leave the right defense exposed, Colin Miller or Rasmus Ristolainen, maybe there's a chance that you don't have to worry about losing a forward. So it's like that. I mean, if Seattle comes and says, hey, I'll give me one of your extra draft picks to take on, a Cody Eakin or a Kyle Okposo, I mean, you do that in a heartbeat. But I think at the end of the day, you're looking at Colin Miller, Rasmus Asplund, or Tage Thompson being the pick from Seattle.
Yeah, as fortunately, we're talking about Tage Thompson having a big tournament for Team USA in the World Championships, and then maybe he's the guy that gets taken by Seattle as he's finally starting to get to that next level. But yeah, you would hope that they would, maybe try to entice them by taking a Cody Eakin, who seems to be the expansion team darling. He was loved in Vegas and just has not been the same since coming to Buffalo.
We got two of them. We got Colin Miller and Cody Eakin, the expansion team darling. So I hope maybe they get to recapture that magic.
Take both. There you go. Both former Vegas Golden Knights. But that's kind of the early breakdown of the Sabres cap situation and just kind of what Austin's thoughts are on that going forward. But we're going to be able to discuss that a lot more, especially when we know where the Sabres are picking with draft lottery. We were going to discuss that on today's show, but we decided to defer that to next week so that we can kind of move forward closer to the June 2nd draft lottery. So if you're looking for draft lottery stuff, stay tuned. We'll have that on the next week's show as well. So with that said, Austin, let's finally get into, I guess, the main event of today's show, and that is the should they stay, should they go, Jack Eichel, Sam Reinhart, Rasmus Ristolainen debate. And firstly, I got to shout out to our Twitter poll, which is now up on the screen for you YouTube watchers. Again, follow us at AGM Sabres Pod. We're always posting updates on there as well, and always doing interactive polls for our shows that we talk about on our episodes each and every week. So make sure you're following us at AGM Sabres Pod. So which of these mainstay Sabres are most likely to be moved? We mentioned, obviously, I put Jack Eichel, Sam Reinhart, Rasmus Ristolainen, or all of the above. So as you can see on the Twitter poll results, the winner was Rasmus Ristolainen with 31.3. Jack Eichel was a close second with 29.2. All of the above was 27.1%, and Sam Reinhart was 12.5%. So Austin, just quick thoughts and reaction to kind of the results of our Twitter poll.
So if we eliminate the all the above and we just focus on the three guys, I think that's kind of what I expected. I expected most of the people to vote Rasmus Ristolainen because I think we've been clamoring for him to be gone every year. Jack Eichel seems like he is trending towards being traded, so I'm not surprised that he's second. Reinhart, well, again, we're going to get into it when we talk about him, but I wasn't surprised to see him as out of the three individuals, the lowest ranked. All of the above, that is the nuclear option. That basically signals Kevin Adams is blowing this up and ready to rebuild. So it'll be interesting to see if any of those three are remaining here. I think if there is going to be one remaining, it will be Sam Reinhart, but that's just my personal opinion.
Okay, so we'll get into that, and I'm going to pull some stats up on the screen here. The top is Jack Eichel for you people on YouTube. Reinhart is the middle, and Rasmus Ristolainen is the bottom. So I've got all three of their career stats up on the page again. Top is Jack Eichel, middle is Sam Reinhart, bottom is Rasmus Ristolainen for you people watching along on YouTube, and that's going to be up on the screen for you guys while we debate this. So, Austin, let's first talk about Rasmus Ristolainen, just because he's the one that's been here the longest, and he's kind of been the guy that everybody expected to be traded years ago, and he's managed to stay on the Sabres his entire career here, and I believe that's 7 years if I'm counting right. 2013-14 was his first year as a Sabres, a 19-year-old, and again, he has just not been given an opportunity on very many good teams here. He's been around nothing but losing culture. He's been through a plethora of head coaches, GMs, so many top draft picks, so many minuses on this team, and just the boat has been shifted so many times with this guy on the team. You have to feel for Rasmus Ristolainen in this situation, given that he's just been here. Him and Zemgus Girgensons have kind of been here since the start of the losing.
I mean, yeah, the only reason I actually feel bad for him is because he's basically said, I want to be traded, but he's basically admitted, like, hey, man, like, if you guys want to trade me, like, go right ahead. I am totally fine with it. Other than that, I mean, if you even look at his career before Buffalo in Finland for TPS Turku, he wasn't on good teams there either. So at some point, I mean, are the Sabres bad solely because of Rasmus Ristolainen? Absolutely not. That is not what I'm saying. But Rasmus Ristolainen is a big reason why they are bad, because he represents the type of thing that he represents the type of player that he should be good, because he plays a lot of minutes and he can get points on the power play. But when you're playing a lot of minutes and you're getting destroyed during those minutes, it doesn't matter that you play a lot of minutes. I mean, that actually hinders the team. And it just, if you look at the trends of Rasmus Ristolainen's career, that is what happened. Every time he's been out on the ice at even strength, the Sabres, they just get boat raced. Like, again, he's not a terrible player, but he's the type of player that his value around the league is high because of, again, he's a tough guy. He plays a lot of minutes. He can get points on the power play. So his value is high. Trade him. Trade him while his value is high, because smart teams aren't going to trade for this guy. Teams that are heavily invested in advanced stats and analytics and how important 5-on-5 play is aren't going to trade for this guy. But there is teams in this league that will pay for this guy. I mean, we had rumors of the Taylor Hall for Ristolainen 1-for-1 back in the day before the Larson deal. We had rumors of Nick Ehlers for Ristolainen from Winnipeg. And Buffalo, for some reason, if that's true, turned those trades down. It's not good. But his value is never going to be that high anymore, but his value is still going to be high. So trade him while you can. Let Will Borgen, let Yoki Haru, Dahlin, let these young defensemen, even Samuelsson. Samuelsson played 12 games for Ristolainen, and we couldn't even evaluate Samuelsson properly because he was playing with a defensive anchor in Ristolainen all the time. We need to get this guy off the team before we can truly see what this defense core can be, and hopefully it's good.
I'm going to pull the cap situation back up on the screen just for you guys, just for reference here. Rasmus Ristolainen, again, you talk about he's 26 years old. He's got 1 year left at $5.4 million. And we heard about the rumors a few years ago with Winnipeg, who was in desperate need of defense and really could still use another defenseman. I mean, the Winnipeg thing is not out of the realm of possibility here, but I don't think there's any way they're getting a Nikolai Ehlers for Rasmus Ristolainen now, like it had been rumored a few years ago. Now Nick Ehlers has kind of taken that next step, especially with Patrick Laine been traded. He's kind of jumped up the ranks there in Winnipeg as far as wingers go. So if you were hoping for a Nick Ehlers return for Rasmus Ristolainen, I think that boat is kind of shipped there. And Jason Botterill, you can say what you want about him not pulling the trigger on that if it was available, but we've been talking about Ristolainen being traded for years now, and it just seems like now it looks like they're going to be in a transition phase here. Get this guy off the team and get him in a scenario where, he can succeed somewhere. And he's like you mentioned, he's not the sole reason the Sabres are bad, but you have to just get rid of the guys that are left from this losing culture that's been here for this last decade. And unfortunately, he's one of the casualties that has been here during that time frame. So I think just getting him off the team and on to somewhere else, I think is going to be healthy for the Sabres and for Ristolainen as well, as he's still only 26 years old. He's still got, the second half of his NHL career left in him. So I think you could see him go and flourish on another team, but I just think it's time to move on here, and I think it would be best for both parties if they do find a trade this offseason.
Yeah, to me, if he's here next year, the offseason was a failure. I mean, he hasn't been good here. You haven't been good while he's been here. He's basically said, I don't care if I'm traded. He's all but requested a trade. He's got 1 year left on his contract, I think, after this year.
Yep.
Or yeah.
Yep.
After the season's over, so he's only got 1 more year left. He's pretty much said at his exit interview, I'm not re-signing here.
Yeah.
Get rid of him.
Yeah.
Move on from him, and please move on from him, because I was a big Ristolainen fan. I think he's still a very good power play defenseman, but as long as he's here, the coaches who are here for some reason still play him as a number 1 defenseman when he is not a number 1 defenseman. So he just needs to be gone and free up that defensive core.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, you're not going to get as much value for him if you wait till the deadline next season, because it'll be a pending UFA. At least if you trade him this offseason, the team gets a full year of his services as opposed to, the last month of the season. So I think that is appealing as well. Again, probably after the Seattle expansion draft, obviously, because he's a contract that, a team probably wouldn't want to take on until after that is completed. So I could definitely see Ristolainen being traded this offseason, and like you mentioned, his value around the league is still very high, so I could see a team being interested in him, and even going forward with the decor that looked really good with Will Borgen and Jacob Bryson on it as well, Henry Jokiharju, Rasmus Ristolainen. So really, is there a spot here for Risto going forward here? It really looks like the Sabres are kind of filling out their top 4D, and it looks like Ristolainen is not going to be in those long-term plans. So I agree with you. I think he should probably go, and it would probably be best for him and the organization. So we'll leave Ristolainen at that, but he's been a productive Sabre despite being on some really, really bad teams during his tenure here. So we'll move on to Sam Reinhart, Austin, and he's kind of the guy that you want to keep. He's kind of the guy that I feel like Ristolainen and Eichel are kind of two guys that are more polarizing as far as trade pieces go. You don't really hear Reinhart as much. Maybe that's for the benefit of the Sabres being able to get a better return, knowing that they don't necessarily want to get rid of Sam Reinhart around the league, and knowing that Jack Eichel and Ristolainen basically won out. Sam Reinhart hasn't come out and said that, but what he said in his exit interview kind of brought something to your mind there.
Yeah, so basically, when you look at Sam Reinhart, the should he stay or should he go thing, we're more talking about, should they stay or should they go this summer. Sam Reinhart, Buffalo almost, unless they get a very good trade for him, they have no reason to trade him this summer. He's a pending restricted free agent. I know he's got arbitration rights, so if he does decide to walk the team to arbitration and get that 1-year deal to get to his pending UFA status, he can do that. That's his right. But he's a pending restricted free agent. Granato reportedly loves him. So if you're going to hire Don Granato as the coach, which most Sabres fans are probably hoping that they do, Reinhart's a player that he likes. We saw him have success as a center. He can be that number 1 center if Jack Eichel is gone. The dude produces. He's not elite by any means, but he's just a good, solid hockey player who, on bad teams, has been consistent. Consistency is Sam Reinhart's game. So to me, he's the player that you don't have to move. If you keep Reinhart but trade Eichel, that actually opens up the Eichel trade to more options, because you're not only looking for solely futures anymore. You're looking for young 25, 24-year-old players rather than just straight up draft picks. If you're trading Reinhart and Eichel, you're blowing this team up. To me, if they keep Reinhart and they trade Eichel for a decent package, are they going to be competitive next year? I don't know. We say that every year and they never are, so I'm never going to say that again. But if you keep Reinhart and somehow hash out a 4 to 5 year contract with him, you're in good shape. Now, if Reinhart comes to you this summer and says, I have no interest in signing a 4 to 5 year deal, to me, you just move on from him anyway, because he's basically made it clear that I'm not re-signing with you after this 1 year. So why hold on to him and hope his value is there at the trade deadline when you could just trade him right now as a pending restricted free agent, and that team has exclusive negotiation rights with him. So it all comes down to Reinhart's desire. If you can convince him to sign a 4 or 5 year deal, you keep him. If not, you move on from him.
He's going to be 26 when when he goes for that new contract. So again, this is last year of our RFA status. So again, like you mentioned, if he's not going to sign a long-term deal, then you move on from him. Again, it's difficult because he was one of the main pieces that started the Sabres rebuild there. He was the first guy basically taken when they had a high draft pick, the second overall pick. They lost the lottery, didn't get Aaron Ekblad, but according to Tim Murray, he had Sam Reinhart at number one anyway, so that they would have taken Sam Reinhart over Aaron Ekblad. I don't know if everybody exactly believes that, but
I don't think anybody believes that.
Well, I guess Tim Murray we can ask him one day if he's around. But again, they had him pegged at number one apparently, and he was the guy that kind of started that. Jack Eichel came the following year, so it'd be tough to see Reinhart go and Eichel go in that regard, Austin, because those are the two guys that you tanked for 2 years to get, and now it just seems like they're going through another transition phase that says, what, we went through all that trouble to get these two guys, and now we're kind of moving on from them. But that's just kind of the state of Sabres hockey that it's been in the last decade.
Yeah, it almost depends on your mentality. I mean, to me, if they moved on from both of them and did the rebuild right, I wouldn't be relieved because no one wants to go through another rebuild, but at least they would say, you know what, it's time. But to me, if there is, we'll get into Eichel next because I have a lot of thoughts on Eichel. None of which my thoughts, by the way, I'm going to preface before we get into Eichel. I don't think Jack Eichel is a bad player. He's not the reason that they're bad. So when we do get into the next topic, please don't attack me for that. But I think if you're going to keep one of those two, Reinhart makes the most sense because he's been consistent. He's not really – you don't need him to be a number one center for the rest of his career if you can keep him here long term. You can build a solid team around him with what you got, and hopefully the Eichel trade would bring in more players to build around him. But he's going to be less expensive. That's just straight up it. He's not going to cost you as much as Jack Eichel did because his numbers and star power aren't what Jack Eichel's are.
Mm-hmm.
So if you are going to keep one, I don't mind it being Reinhart.
And on the screen there, I mean, Reinhart, 25 goals this year. I mean, we saw, and we put in the article, Sam Reinhart can play without Jack Eichel and generate offense on his own line. We saw that. I mean, he's been a guy that's been stuck to Jack Eichel's right wing for a long time here, drafted as a centerman, and we finally got to see what he could do at the center ice position with Eichel not in the lineup. He had, I mean, look at his power play production. It was off the charts the last month of the season and one of the best in all of the NHL. So why not, if you think that Reinhart, if you can kind of get his mindset back to want to be here long term, there's no reason why he can't be one of the mainstay guys on this roster going forward, in my opinion. I mean, 40 points in 54 games, 25 goals. That's a great season for Sam Reinhart after, that's his career high in goals, and it was a half of a season. So you see the progression there at 25 years old now, and without Jack, if there was something positive that came out of Jack Eichel being injured, it was the fact that we got to see Sam Reinhart elevate his game to another level and show that he can play without having Jack Eichel as a centerman here, and he can be a guy that Jason Botterill loved to say when he was here that could generate offense.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at his career, I mean, aside from the 9-game stint in 2014-15, there's only one season where he didn't hit 20 goals. And in that year, he still had 17 goals and 30 assists. Like, his production is there. We saw him produce without Jack Eichel this year. We saw him play center this year. We saw pretty much Sam Reinhart do all the stuff that we wanted to see from him that Jason Botterill said he could do, but he was never given the chance to do. We saw him do that under Don Granato, which also furthers my belief that Don Granato and Jason Botterill were on the same page. And if Granato was the head coach under Botterill, Sabres might be in a different situation. That's a different conspiracy theory that I have for another day, though.
Another hit at soccer boy,
yeah,
but it's okay.
Yeah, but like if you can convince him to stay, if you can convince him to sign for 4 to 5 years somehow, you do it. You don't trade him. But if he wants out, he wants out. And I think you can get a decent package for Sam Reinhart. I think he's got number one line capability on the wing and on center. He scores goals. To me, he's a good trade chip. He is a good trade chip if that's the route they decide to go.
And he's a Western Canadian boy, Austin. There might be some Western Canadian teams that would be looking at the services of Sam Reinhart. You look at teams like Calgary and Vancouver. Would those options be available for him? But I guess that's a discussion for another day as far as teams go, but definitely there's going to be suitors for Sam Reinhart. He's definitely got a lot of value around the league, and it's not going to be a guy that you're going to throw away for a bottom end prospect and a second round pick. It's going to have to be a good package for Kevin Adams to be enticed to get rid of Sam Reinhart. But again, if it's the right thing and you don't see him signing long term after this after he signs a 1 or 2 year bridge deal here, you kind of have to move on, and there would be opportunities for them to get a good return from him if they choose to bring him out west in Canada where he's from.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, if I'm Kevin Adams, I go to him and his agent and say, it's 4 to 5 years. If you want to sign for 4 to 5 years here, I'll pay you. You know, maybe hint at him, you can be the future captain when a certain other captain is potentially traded. But if Reinhart says he has no indication of signing long-term with you this summer, you trade him. You don't risk him going to pending UFA status, because once you're a pending UFA, you're not staying in Buffalo.
That's just how it goes, right? Or you have to overpay, I guess, the opposite of the hometown discount to stay in Buffalo right now, and even places like Ottawa, just places that haven't had a lot of winning over the last decade or so. So, again, we're gonna get to Jack Eichel, but we have to hit one more commercial break. So we're gonna give you guys, we're gonna tease you guys a little bit. We're gonna talk about Jack Eichel in our final segment today as well. I forgot to talk about the coaching vacancies. So in the last segment, we're gonna talk about should he stay, should he go, Jack Eichel, as well as the rumored head coaching opportunities for Buffalo. So stay right here. Be right back after this final commercial break on the Niagara Hockey Lowdown Sabres edition right here on the Armchair GM Sports Network.
J&L Flooring is a Niagara-based specialty flooring and design company. They take great pride in providing elite customer service and support. They are a specialty flooring and decor boutique shop with a beautiful showroom, great pricing, and a wide variety and truly unique selection of products. All their products are environmentally friendly and responsibly produced, so you can feel great about your flooring choices. Their goal as a local business is to build authentic relationships based on honesty and integrity that they foster with respect and authenticity, offering unique and wide range of quality products presented by a knowledgeable and patient team. They connect with their customers to simplify the process to make their life easier and to make their homes beautiful. Visit them at 4424 Montrose Road, Niagara Falls, or find out more at jnlflooring.com. Open Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. through 5 p.m., and Saturday, 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. 905-358-3299 J&L Flooring.
The Spicy Olive Bar and Grill is located on the top of Clifton Hill and just a 5-minute walk from the majestic Niagara Falls. It is conveniently nestled in the heart of the tourist district. A family-owned and operated business, the Spicy Olive opened its doors in May of 2003 and has since been established as an authentic and unique Italian restaurant and bar. Its rustic ambiance and time-worn finishing provide a warm and inviting dining experience. Offering an array of delicious dishes, they specialize in authentic Italian cuisine, homemade sauces, fresh ingredients, and consistently providing a strong foundation on which they build their menu. As night falls, the Spicy Olive shifts to a lively lounge where drinks and live music come together to make a perfect evening. For more than 15 years, they have provided not only for their dedicated locals, but their customers from all over the world with authentic Italian food and great live entertainment. Open daily 5 p.m. to 10 p.m. for dinner and till 2 a.m. for drinks. Check out their new menu and book reservations on their website at Spicy Olive Bar and Grill, it's with an E at the end, .com, or call 905-371-2323 for reservations as well. The Spicy Olive Bar and Grill.
You're listening to the Armchair GM Sports Network, the Niagara region's best local source for North American sports podcasting coverage. By sports fans, for sports fans.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the final segment of our Niagara Hockey Lowdown Sabres edition right here on the Armchair GM Sports Network. Brandon Caputo and Austin Broad back with you here. And this final segment today is brought to you by the Niagara Employment Help Center, helping job seekers find work with their free services and counseling professionals. 6100 Thorlstone Road, Niagara Falls, across from Camisos Plaza. Book your appointment today at ehc.on.ca. So, speaking of job search, Jack Eichel might be searching for a new job with another team if he is moved on here. Main event of today's show, should they stay, should they go? We talked about Sam Reinhart and Rasmus Ristolainen in the last segment, and obviously the big polarizing figure in Buffalo and around the talk around the NHL is do the Buffalo Sabres move on from franchise centerman Jack Eichel in the offseason? And a trade of this magnitude, Austin, we don't usually see this, a guy of Jack Eichel's, abilities this early on in his career, signed to a long-term deal. at this point in his career, that franchise centerman, we don't see this happen very often. So if it's a trade that's going to happen, it's going to be earth-shattering around the NHL for a 25-year-old guy that's just hitting his stride. I know he's coming off a neck injury, but a guy of Jack Eichel's caliber, Austin, I can't remember the last time somebody at his level was traded this early in his career on a long-term contract. With all the factors given there, just it seems crazy that somebody like him would be on the move.
Yeah, the closest comparable, and it's really not the same, is Tyler Seguin. I mean, he was traded young in his career after winning a cup and ended up, going on to sign a nice big deal with Dallas. Obviously, production-wise, probably not quite the same as Jack Eichel, but that's kind of the closest comp I got. And the whole premise of a Jack Eichel trade, for most sane, logical people, the whole premise of a Jack Eichel trade isn't really about if Jack Eichel has been good in Buffalo. It's more or less, is the relationship done? Because when you listen to Jack Eichel talk and when you listen to Kevin Adams talk, that relationship sounds beyond repair to me. Like, this surgery thing, I think, was a bit overblown. I think, once he got the opinion from the team doctors, and his second opinion also kind of agreed with the team doctors, saying you don't need surgery. To me, rightfully so, Jack Eichel is like, I want surgery. This is my leverage out of here. I'm going to use it to my advantage. Because all indications are the team was not expecting Eichel to be that open in his exit interview. And to me, the only reason you're that open in your exit interview is if you're done.
Yeah, I mean, if you watch his exit interview, you can basically see he's checked out already. The fact that he even had to come back and do that, it seemed like maybe it was a farewell interview and an exit interview, literally as he's exiting out the door of Buffalo. That's what it seemed like from that exit interview. But again, it's just some of his comments of how open he was about the organization and handling of his injury status and him wanting surgery and him saying, that's the nature of an NHL contract, is that you're under team liability. So if there was some sort of disconnect there, we could definitely see it. And that's what started popping up all these trade rumors after that exit interview around the league, was just, the puzzling, scenario that is Jack Eichel as the captain of this team and kind of not wanting to move forward here with that franchise player and that guy that you built your whole franchise and your whole team around and is signed here long term. It just seems like the Sabres are kind of, they have two sheets of paper in their hand. One, life with Jack Eichel on this roster and what that roster, breakdown would look like. And on the other hand, you have life without Jack Eichel and what that might look like when you get a boatload of assets back in prospects and top-end prospects and draft picks, and kind of what the roster would look like without Jack Eichel on it. And we kind of got a taste of that when he was injured for the second half of the year and kind of what that roster looked like. But it seemed, because of, the way that the team played under Don Granato, Austin, and we saw without Jack Eichel that they could still win some games and be competitive here, that maybe some people who, including myself, who were 100% don't trade Jack Eichel, maybe it's creeped into their minds a little bit that, you know what, we saw this team be able to move on without Jack Eichel, so maybe he isn't the Lord and Savior that we and, Sabres fans around Twitter have all been griping for, to keep Jack Eichel on this roster, and somebody that, it's a luxury to have him, but we saw, without him, that this team could still be able to survive.
Yeah, so I'm probably about 99% for trading Jack Eichel. And again, the reason I'm for trading Jack Eichel is not anything to do with the on-ice talent. The on-ice talent with Jack Eichel is there. Anyone who watches hockey can see it. He is a very good hockey player. He's a superstar. He is one of the elites. Elite gets thrown around a lot. I think Jack Eichel qualifies as the elite. You trade Jack Eichel because, one, the dude pretty much said, I don't want to be here. So why do you want to keep him here? Adams got a lot of grief for his we want players who want to be here thing. The Jack Eichel situation, I agree with him. If he doesn't want to be here, why do I want him here? Look what happened with Pierre-Luc Dubois. He didn't want to be in Columbus, and he literally mailed it in on TV, on the ice. He mailed it in. Jack Eichel is a way better player than Pierre-Luc Dubois. If a guy like that mails it in while he's on your roster, you're going to become even more embarrassed than you already are. And let's face it, this franchise is very embarrassing for the most part. You have to trade this guy right now. Maybe not right now, but this summer makes the most sense. There's the argument for let him play to start of next year to get his trade value back up. But again, is he going to come into Buffalo and give his 100% because he's fired up to be there? I don't know. I'm not going to say he's going to mail it in. I don't think he's that type of player. He's a competitor. But when you don't want to be somewhere, like us, if we are at a job that we don't want to be at, we check out. That's just the nature of being a human being. I don't think they can handle that, not embarrassment, that media spectacle when they're already the biggest media spectacle for all the wrong reasons in the entire National Hockey League. You throw his name on the market this summer, there's going to be a lot of offers. Hopefully they pick the right one, but there's going to be a lot of offers, and see what you can get for this guy. Because when the relationship is this bad, there is no benefit to keeping him here. There's no benefit to hiring an experienced head coach to come in and try and fix the relationship with Jack Eichel, because guess what? Jack Eichel has a no-trade clause that kicks in next year. And if you think for 1 second that he is not going to ask for a trade once he has all the power, I don't know what to tell you. I would love to be as positive and naive as those people are.
Yeah, I mean, you brought up a good point that I was gonna give you a softball there with the trade, with his no trade clause that kicks in after next year, and his ability to kind of nix trades to certain franchises. And you would think now that 30 teams in the NHL, you could make a case for at least, I'd say 25 to 30 that would be interested in his services. Obviously, you think that teams like Toronto and Edmonton, where they kind of have their center ice positions figured out, obviously wouldn't be involved. But any team that doesn't have two elite number one centers, which is very rare, there's maybe 4 or 5 teams around the league that do. Other than that, you'd think that any other team would be calling about Jack Eichel, because he could be the number one center on most of those teams around the NHL and a guy that anybody would want on their team. So if the Sabres want to be able to move him, they're going to have the most options and the most opportunity for a bidding war this offseason, because once next offseason kicks in, you know, that New York Rangers trade that, you know, everybody's been clamoring for, that he wants to be a New York Ranger and he could kind of, you know, basically pave his own path to certain teams. And if you're the Sabres, you obviously want to trade him out west to be able to not play him as much as opposed to playing him in the east, especially not a team like Boston or the Rangers, who you'd see a lot, and a team that you'd have to go through in order to get to the playoffs. You don't want to do that. So obviously you want to trade him to a west team like Anaheim or an LA, and at this time you can do that. If he doesn't like LA or Anaheim next year, he can nix those trades. If he doesn't like the direction of either of those teams, he doesn't have to go there. They can be on his no trade clause, and he can kind of determine where he wants to go and kind of force the Sabres' hand into certain areas, which, you know, we've seen in the past that hasn't worked out very well in the Sabres' favor for guys with no trade clauses, especially Taylor Hall, for example, this most recent, who's gone on to have a great playoffs for the Boston Bruins so far. But Jack Eichel trade Austin, obviously much more suitors this offseason, and that no trade clause kicking in could really limit the Sabres' opportunity here.
Yeah, I mean, DEFCON 5 worst case scenario is they trade him next year at the draft before his no trade clause kicks in. And I totally understand that. People who want to see Jack Eichel in a Sabres uniform, they're clamoring for that. But to me, why? This summer, like you said, you know, maybe even Seattle gets in after their roster. I don't think they'll have any high-end pieces, but are you kidding me? Seattle would be probably all over a potential Jack Eichel trade. There's, like you said, I'm with the idea of trading him out west. To me, there's four teams. 4 teams that make the most sense. One is the New York Rangers, because, I mean, they do have the pieces. I don't want to trade him there. And because all their fans keep saying we don't need to trade Lafreniere or Capo Caco, they're untouchable. Please, stop. You're just stop. If you think Capo Caco is untouchable for Jack Eichel, then I don't know what to tell you. But you're looking at a team like Minnesota, LA, Calgary, even Anaheim, but I don't think Anaheim
has the pieces.
I think they have the pieces. They have Zegras, they have Drysdale, but they're not in the spot to want to trade for that guy, because they're in the middle of a rebuild. They don't. Why they're going to do the Tim Murray and accelerate their rebuild and potentially screw up their future of their organization. There's only a couple players in this league that are capable of carrying an entire team to the playoffs by themselves, and that's Connor McDavid, Nathan McKinnon. But Nathan McKinnon doesn't even do it by himself, but he's probably capable of it. But it's Connor McDavid. And maybe Sidney Crosby. Back in the day, there's not a lot of players that are capable of carrying an entire hockey team by themselves. So you're looking at Calgary, Minnesota, and LA in the West, New York in the East. Those are the 4 teams that have the pieces, the cap space, and make a lot of sense for Jack Eichel. You get those 4 teams bidding against each other. You weed out all the bad offers, and you have potentially something there. I mean, you've already seen Calgary pretty much say they're willing to include Matthew Tkachuk in a trade. I mean, every Sabres fan ever would love Matthew Tkachuk. One, he's a good player. Two, all the suburban hockey dads who love grit, grind, and jam. How do you not love a Tkachuk? Like if you can get Matthew Tkachuk, some prospects, maybe one prospect and a high first round pick and another draft pick there, that's a trade that you're not winning that trade because Matthew Tkachuk isn't Jack Eichel, but Matthew Tkachuk is a damn good hockey player, and you're getting a lot of pieces. Minnesota has Marco Rossi, who Buffalo probably should have drafted. They have Kevin Fiala. They have Matthew Boldy. They have the draft picks. LA, we've already talked at length about their prospect system. There are teams that have the pieces to make a Jack Eichel trade enticing, and we all know once his no-trade clause kicks in, maybe LA is the only team on that list he would go to, but he definitely ain't going to Calgary or Minnesota. So why limit yourself when you can get the entire league bidding against each other this summer and get rid of a guy who, as great as he is and as awesome as he's been in Buffalo, he just doesn't seem happy and he doesn't want to be here. Why do you want to, for both sides, that makes no sense to keep him here next year. It doesn't make any sense.
As great as he is, and again, I'll pull up the stats for him, and he's on the top here. Again, just an incredible career through his 6 years, 355 points in 375 games. Obviously, 21 games this season, shortened with injury, 18 points still in a very bad season for the Sabres. But again, like you mentioned, just why would you not want to make this trade while you still can? Obviously, you're not, like you mentioned in the first segment, you're not winning a trade with losing Jack Eichel. You're not getting a player back of his caliber. If you think that, it's not going to happen. Those trades don't happen in the NHL. Like you mentioned, Matthew Tkachuk would be, the most NHL ready. Well, he is. As far as NHL ready guys, I mean, you're not getting the top end prospects, or you're not getting the guys that are, I guess you could say, ready to jump into the league and score 90 points. You're going to get the guys back that have the potential to get those to be an 80 to 90 point guy. You're getting a Matthew Tkachuk who is a 60 to 70 point guy in a great year that has all the intangibles of being a great two-way hockey player and is known in the league for that. Still at a young age as well. But you're not getting the value back of Jack Eichel that you might think that you're deserved. And again, if you're a team like the New York Rangers, I don't care what they say. If you're getting a player of Jack Eichel's caliber, you're going to have to part with an Alexis Lafreniere or Capo Caco. As much as you consider those guys untouchable, that's a trade that you say that nobody's untouchable. It's a guy like Jack Eichel. It's not a top six forward. This is a franchise level top end centerman in the prime of his career. Again, the neck injury is something, but they're not giving up Philip Cheadle and a second-round pick for Jack Eichel, which they seem to think, and they overvalue their players immensely, it seems like, over there in Rangerland with Capo Caco and Alexis Lafreniere. But again, like you mentioned, there's a lot of options this offseason, and it just seems like the options without Jack Eichel on this team seem to be outweighing the options of Jack Eichel on this team, just for the amount of assets that you can get back. You can get guys like Matthew Tkachuk as well that can step right into the lineup, and you can also have those prospects that have the potential to be those high-end top-line players, because that's basically the type of trade you're looking for when you're getting rid of a guy like Jack Eichel. You're not going to get lower-end prospects and mid-round draft picks. You're getting the Brinks truck is backing up, Austin. So, I mean, it's tough. You would hate to see Jack Eichel go for what he's done for the Sabres, but again, he's been around nothing but losing, and even with him on this team, it has not been close to a playoff team, anywhere close to a playoff team. So without him in this lineup, maybe that those assets and what this team could be moving forward might be better, just given the fact that this relationship seems to be fractured at this point.
Yeah, I mean, again, it sucks. My premise is not because Jack Eichel is a bad hockey player. He's a fantastic hockey player. The team tried to build around him. I don't think they did it properly. The team tried to build around him. They went out, they got Kyle Oposo. They went out, they got Ryan O'Reilly. They went out, they got Jeff Skinner. They went out, they got Taylor Hall. Like, they've tried. They just haven't done it properly. So in a sense, the team did fail Jack Eichel. And at the end of the day, Jack Eichel didn't necessarily fail the team, but the Jack Eichel era in Buffalo, again, not because of Jack Eichel. He's good. I got to keep stressing that because I don't feel like getting attacked on Twitter. The Jack Eichel era in Buffalo has been a disappointment. And the only reason it's the Jack Eichel era is because he's the captain. He's the face of the franchise. So he is the main figure in this era. This era has been a disappointment. The Pagulas have poorly run the organization. The coaches have poorly managed their roster. The GMs have. Tim Murray tried to accelerate the rebuild. Jason Botterill traded prospects and assets for no apparent reason. Ralph Kruger brought in Cody Eakin and Taylor Hall. Like, there hasn't really been a clear line or plan for this team. I'm hoping Adams and Carmanos have that plan, and trading Jack Eichel is a good way to start the rebuild that needs to be done, because we all agreed they needed to rebuild. They got Jack Eichel and Sam Reinhart. The rebuild never really happened. It was, oh, let me go get Evander Kane. Oh, let me go get Ryan O'Reilly. Let me accelerate on the fly here. The fans don't really have the patience or the luxury to go through what Detroit is going through. Detroit, look at Detroit's prospect system. They're at least fun. They're not a good team, but they're at least fun, and they have a lot of young guys. That is what Buffalo should have done 6 years ago. It's just unfortunate that that's what Buffalo needs to do still, and that's probably what they're going to do now. And
Detroit, I mean, they had the longest playoff streak in the NHL. And obviously you knew that had to come to an end at some point, and the rebuild had to start. The Sabres didn't reap any benefits like Detroit did, with those playoff teams and cup-winning teams. The Sabres have been through no winning. So, again, it's going to be very tough for a fan base to be able to endure another rebuild after a decade of this, and nothing to show for it in the mid-2000s where they had their opportunities, and even going into the late 2010s, they were still playoff teams. So they're reaping no benefits. So I understand that the fan base is not going to be happy going through another one, and we're not going to be happy going through another one through another decade. But if that's what needs to be done here, you can't just keep being stagnant and having this team not work out. Then you're going to be in the same scenario in 2 or 3 years, and then it starts. So start it now, other than letting it get worse, and then you're waiting even longer. So, again, it's unfortunate, but I think that's the route that it looks like we're going if they do decide to blow it up and get rid of guys like Jack Eichel, Sam Reinhart, or Rasmus Ristolainen off this roster, who have been longtime productive Sabres since they've been drafted all three as high draft picks. But, again, it's not working with this group. So if it's not working, the definition of insanity is continuing to do something even though you're getting the same result. So if the Sabres aren't insane and the Pagulas know what they're doing, and I'll use that term lightly, they decide to change things up here and go with the vibrance of the youth that could be driven into this organization with a bunch of assets that you could get for basically not just Jack Eichel, but all three of these guys. If you decide to, it could be a completely different, overhauled looking organization from top to bottom, as far as guys playing in the NHL next year, as far as guys in Roch, and just prospects and more draft picks that could be loaded into this organization this offseason.
My message is going to be simple as this: do it now while you have all the power over Jack Eichel and Sam Reinhart. Because next year, you don't have any power, and you're not going to get the return that you could have gotten. You're going to set yourself up for an even bigger failure going forward. As much as we all would love Jack Eichel and Sam Reinhart to take the Buffalo Sabres to the playoffs next year, more than likely isn't going to happen even if you keep them here. So why even keep them here? And screw the organization. Like, everyone's saying, oh, I hope Jack Eichel goes and has success whenever he's traded. I mean, I don't really care what he does once he's traded. I want the Sabres to be good once Jack Eichel is traded. So trading him now gives you the best shot at being good in the future. You're going to be bad for another 2 to 3 years. Deal with it. Watch the young kids. At least have some excitement. We don't want to be watching Brian Giunta. Like, no disrespect to Brian Giunta. We don't want to be sitting here watching Brian Giunta's, for Cody Eakin, Tobias Reeder, Drake Caggiula. No. You do need some veterans, and I get that, but knowing the team's going to be bad, I would rather, as sad as it was, the Granato portion of the season was fun, because we got to see Casey Middlestat, Rasmus Ristolainen, Dylan Cousins, all of these guys do good. So if we're going to be bad, at least let me watch the young kids, because I'll be entertained.
Absolutely. So that's basically it for the who should stay, who should go. But talking about Don Granato and the coaching, we're going to end today's discussion by just talking about Austin's reaction to some of these head coaching candidates, I guess you could say, and rumors around the league of what Buffalo's going to do next. We saw Don Granato, Donnie Meatballs, whatever they want to call him on Twitter these days. These nicknames are getting ridiculous. But Obviously, he had a great showing in the second half of the season as the Sabres head coach, and gave a very positive reflection on what he could be as a head coach, especially for these very young players that took the next level and took that next step under Don Granato, that next level of confidence into their NHL careers. But it looks like they're going to go through the interview process as well. Maybe Don Granato still is an option, but they're going to go and interview some candidates, Austin. So who are you looking at here from the rumored names, and just kind of general thoughts on the Sabres head coaching vacancy?
So just for full transparency, I want Granato to be the coach going forward. I have no issue with them doing a coaching search. You have to do your due diligence, especially with this organization, because let's face it, it seems like every mistake or every decision they make is a mistake. So doing your due diligence is a good thing. I think Granato is the right guy to coach this team the way it's going to be constructed. So I hope he does get the job. By all indications, he's still the in-house favorite. But today, LeBrun came out and said they are lining up interviews with Bruce Boudreau and Rick Tocchet. Tocchett's already interviewed with the Rangers. Boudreau, as we all know, was the fan favorite to replace Ralph Kruger when he was fired. They've already reached out to a number of college coaches, including national champion UMass coach Greg Carvel. I don't see him leaving UMass. He's had a great program. I mean, if you're the Sabres, why hire a college coach when you have Don Granato, who's basically the same thing, but Granato's already been a coach here and the players like him. To me, you're only replacing Granato if you're going for an experienced guy like Boudreau or Tocchet. But also, if you're bringing in Boudreau, why is Boudreau coming here if you're trading Jack Eichel? So to me, the biggest concern is the reason I want Don Granato is because Don Granato being here means the organization knows what they need to do. Going out and hiring Bruce Boudreau only to keep Jack Eichel for another year would be an utter disaster, I think. Or if Boudreau is open to coming here with the idea of Eichel being gone, I'm willing to talk about Bruce Boudreau being the head coach. But to me, it was either Travis Green, who just re-signed with the Canucks, or Don Granato.
Yeah, I mean, you know what you're going to get from Bruce Boudreau. His teams play very, very good offense. We saw with the Washington Capitals back in the day. He's not afraid to let his teams play offense and kind of overcompensate that for lack of defense in that regard. But the Sabres, we saw under Ralph Kruger and kind of the handcuffs being let off under Don Granato, that they could, start to use their skill and not just play that defensive game that we saw work with guys like Barry Trotz and John Tortorella, but Ralph Kruger clearly didn't get people to buy in because they saw it not working like those other two coaches have a pedigree of being able to get those teams to be playoff teams. So it didn't work under Ralph Kruger, the defensive system. Don Granato unchained and let the team go and play. We saw what they could do offensively, and a guy like Bruce Boudreau, that's going to be even elevated more to playing offense. And again, I think the head coaching hire, like you mentioned there, is going to determine a lot on what this team is going to do moving forward. If you bring in Bruce Boudreau, you'd have to really think about, is Jack Eichel going to be on this team next year, because that would be a high possibility. But if you bring back Don Granato, it seems like you mentioned, you hit the nail on the head that this organization knows what they have to do and move on from guys like Jack Eichel, Rasmus Ristolainen, and Sam Reinhart. By bringing a guy back like Don Granato, you kind of get, with the head coaching hire, what this team's going to look like going into the offseason and going into next year. You know what kind of team that they're going to be looking at icing come 2021-22.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say on the record, like, if Bruce Boudreau is okay with Jack Eichel being traded, I'm all for hiring Bruce Boudreau. Like, to me, it's Granato or Boudreau. Those are the only two that I would accept. I don't think Rod Brind'Amour is hitting free agency. I think Carolina is going to pay the Brinks truck for him.
They better.
If he got to free agency, I would just give him all of Pagula Sports and Entertainment to come coach the Sabres.
Part ownership.
But beside the point, if it's Granato or Boudreau, and as long as Boudreau is okay with the possibility and the likelihood of Jack Eichel not being here, I'm okay with those two guys. David Quinn, please don't talk about Quinn, please. I don't care that he was Jack Eichel's college coach. That's a 2015 Pagula-esque move. Let's hire Jack Eichel's college coach. He'll make Jack Eichel happy. He was not that great in New York. Gerard Gallant, I mean, he was good in Vegas. He was good in Florida, but look how short-lived he was in both of those places. John Tortorella, there's no need for him. I don't mind John Tortorella at all. There's no desire. There's just not a fit there. Why would he come coach this team when they're not anywhere near being successful? Tocchet, again, he's okay. We interviewed him when Botterill was hired, but again, they're not moving the needle for me. If it's not Bruce Boudreau, just keep Don Granato. The players like him, the fans like him. He likes being here. He's had success with the younger kids. Like, it seems like this is such a layup that the Sabres lucked into a very good head coach when they haven't had good ones. And now it seems like they might actually somehow screw it up, even though one just fell in their lap.
Yeah, we saw with Don Granato in his, his job interview the second half of the season. And like you mentioned, if Don Granato or Bruce Boudreau are the head coaches of this team next year, I think the fans kind of they feel like the organization has taken another step. If you hire one of those other guys, it's kind of like, is it really moving the needle a lot? If you bring back Don Granato, you take that next step into what he was able to do the second half of the year. And if you bring in Bruce Boudreau, you're getting an all-out offensive team that is going to be playing the type of style that you wanted after getting rid of a guy like Ralph Kruger and his majorly defensive system, and a guy like John Tortorella. Just doesn't make sense to bring in another guy like that. So I agree with you. I think Don Granato and or Bruce Boudreau would be the two options that you could really see being optimistic hires if you're Buffalo fans.
Yeah, absolutely. If it's one of those two guys, I'm happy. I mean, I do love Don Granato. Would I be sad if he's not the head coach? Yes. But if it's because a guy like Bruce Boudreau is here, Boudreau would bring the respect that Buffalo does need. Granato brings that style that they both have that offensive style, but Granato just seems like such an easy cakewalk that they need to do it. Mm-hmm. But if Boudreau's willing to come here and Boudreau is okay with the possibility that we're trading Jack Eichel, how is he not on par with Don Granato? I mean, if it's one of those two guys, I don't think there's any reason to complain.
Yeah. So that's basically it for today's episode. I mean, we got into a lot today, over an hour episode, but a lot of good discussion about looking forward to the Sabres offseason here, and should they trade some of these guys. The coaching staff is another thing that we have to look forward to going into the offseason. So there's a lot of things going on within this organization, and again, June 2nd, the draft lottery as well is gonna give us a better idea on things. If the Sabres are going to be picking first, second, or third overall, if they decide to move on from that pick, we can discuss all that coming into the offseason and moving forward as we look towards the draft lottery on June 2nd as the next kind of big piece here, unless we see the Sabres decide to hire their head coach before then. But with that said, Austin, any closing remarks before we wrap up the show today?
All I got to say is, if you're a Sabres fan, whether you think it's good or bad, this is going to be a year where your team likely dominates the headlines all summer. So if you're a guy like me who absolutely loves, I mean, we're never in the playoffs, so that's why I love the offseason. But I love the offseason. It's my favorite part, aside from actually watching the Sabres play. But I love the rumors. I love the drafts. I love the trades. I love free agent frenzy. I live for that stuff. Being a Sabres fan and knowing that my team is going to dominate the headlines this summer is exciting for me. Whether it's good or bad, we'll find out. But at least right now, it's exciting.
Absolutely. It gives us a lot to talk about on this podcast moving forward into the summer, as, again, first episode with video. So look for big things from us moving forward as we take the next step into the network with the network here. So with that said, ladies and gentlemen, that's going to wrap up our latest installment of the Niagara Hockey Lowdown Sabres edition on the Armchair GM Sports Network. As always, I'm one of your hosts of this podcast. My name is Brandon Caputo. You can follow me on Twitter at Caputs13_AGM. As well, you can follow my co-host Austin at Austin_Abroad, and check out his stuff at TCB and Future Considerations as well. So again, thank you to all of our great sponsors who help put us on, support the network, keeping the show on the air, and to you viewers out there and Sabres fans, hockey fans, for staying along and listening to us for this extended episode of the Niagara Hockey Lowdown Sabres edition as we discuss the Sabres offseason plans right here in the Armchair GM Sports Network by sports fans for sports fans. We'll see you guys next episode.